Hi everyone, welcome back to Poetology. I've been talking about doing a video about queer poetry or trans poetry for a very long time, and today, finally, I pulled out the books I have that are by LGBTQ authors. And next time I will focus specifically on the gender queer, gender non-conforming, non-binary and trans poets. So let's get started with Mary Oliver, whom most of you will be familiar with. And this is Dog Song. I will buy any poetry collection that has the word dog in the title. And do I need to say anything about Mary Oliver? I'm not sure. I think most of you will be familiar with her name. You can easily check out some of her poems online. Some are very famous, such as Wild Geese, and I think you will enjoy reading her. So the ones I'm starting with are slightly older ones, and here I've got Adrienne, who is another well-known poet. The collection I have is Diving into the Wreck, and it's really good. It's a collection of the poems that she wrote between 71 and 72. If you want to read poetry by women, I think she's one of the big names that you should definitely check out. The next one, however, is less known, but she's amazing. This is Judy Graham, The Work of a Common Woman. I found a second-hand copy. I don't think it's available anymore. I don't think it's being printed anymore, but this contains that poem, which I think I read online. I will check. If I find the link, I will put it below. The poem is titled A Woman is Talking to Death. So here there are various poems and then that one long poem, which is really, really good, and I recommend it. It's also by a working class poet as well as lesbian poet. So there's a lot to say for this. And it has another poem titled Edward the Dyke. And I'm going to read a passage from Confrontations with the Devil in the Form of God. Okay. You are what is female. You shall be called Eve, and what is masculine shall be called God. And from your name, Eve, we shall take the word evil, and from God's, the word good. Now you understand patriarchal morality. Now, I've included Hart Crane's The Bridge, just because I have a copy of it. I have to admit I'd never read Hart Crane until I had to teach The Bridge. So Hart Crane doesn't necessarily talk about homosexuality directly, certainly not in The Bridge. He does it a bit more in other poems, but never extremely explicitly. However, he is definitely a very important gay poet, alongside Walt Whitman. I have already mentioned the next few ones in my video on indigenous poetry, but I'll include them again quickly. One is Smuggling Cherokee by Shuck. The next one is Full Metal Indigiqueer by Joshua Whitehead. There is Feed by Tommy Pico, and This Wound is a World by Billy Ray Belcourt. I will call this the Holy Trilogy of indigenous gay North American poetry. So focusing on contemporary poetry now, you will have heard and read and appreciated Ocean Vuong, Night Sky with Exit Wounds. If you haven't, there's no time to lose. Get your copy of this. It was incredible when it came out, and a few years later, it's still incredible. I don't think anyone else writes the same way that Ocean Vuong does, and it's really gripping, really personal, but also very mysterious, very beautiful in the way that things are rendered. It's very close to the skin, very poignant. I definitely recommend it. I'd like to talk about Norman Erikson Pasaribu, who is from Indonesia. It's translated by Tiffany Tsao, and the translation work is excellent, and Tiffany worked very closely with Norman on the translation, and they've talked about it quite a lot. When I met Norman in London, they were touring together and talked about the collaboration of having these poems translated and the tensions between the difficulty really to publish it in English, and how pronouns especially were less gendered in Indonesian than they are in English, and how it was easier to say some things in Indonesian. And yeah, but the translation work is really, really beautiful. I also have Shakespeare in Soho by Jeremy Reeds, and I think I really bought this for the cover, let's be honest. But the idea is excellent. It's a rewriting of the Shakespearean sonnets in a very contemporary, very punchy, queer way. And there are some gems in here. I don't know if I loved it as a whole, but I definitely enjoyed some of it. The way it's written, how punchy and cool it is, and very inventive in its rewriting of Shakespeare. It's a very loose rewriting of Shakespearean sonnets, but it is actually, in sonnets, they are numbered, they are all, technically sonnets, and yeah, they work really well. It's very inventive. Then I have Paul Stephenson's Selfie with Waterlilies. It's a shorter pamphlet. Paul is behind the organisation of the Festival Poetry in Aldeburgh, where I've gone several times and which I really like. And he has written 3 pamphlets, I believe. His poetry is very nice, like very aesthetically pleasing, focuses on tiny details, small moments, and it's also very tight in the form itself. So this one, like many others, is something I picked up at Gaze the Word, the famous gay library in London. I will also link it below. So I wouldn't have come across it by myself, and it's a bit more spoken word in the way that it's written. So even though the form still looks pretty traditional, it's really good to read this aloud. It's meant to be spoken, I think, and it's a bit catchier, I'd say, than some of the other collections here. And it's a really good start. If you're a bit intimidated by poetry and you're not sure how to get into it, then I find this very accessible, very funny, and quite daring, quite extravagant. So yes, this was a nice surprise for me to discover. Then I ordered Boyishly by Tanya Olson from this amazing publisher, Yes Books, in Portland. And all the poetry collections I've ordered from them were very innovative and very exciting. And I love the epigraph, a quote from Virginia Woolf's Orlando. He was young, he was boyish, he did but as nature bade him do. There's a play with gender and masculinity that I really enjoyed, and I think these books in general are beautiful. I will link the publisher down below. Here is a collection by Jane Campbell, who is an amazing YouTuber. I'll link her channel as well. And this talks about fairy tales and also physical disability. It's very exploratory. There's a lot about the circus and the idea of gazing at people's bodies like objects and what they do in a fairy tale way. I'm not sure if what I'm saying makes a lot of sense, so you'll have to actually grab a copy. I have undying admiration for Mary Jean Chan's Flèche. I think it's one of my favorite poetry collections, actually. Mary Jean Chan writes about being queer. She writes about growing up in Hong Kong. She writes about her mother quite a lot and her relationship with her mother, but also being queer in that environment and then living in the UK. And I will link one of her poems, which I think is my favorite, titled The Window, in the description below, so you can read that poem. I was lucky enough to be on a poetry school course with Mary Jean Chan called The Studio, and some of us ended up at Poetry in Aldeburgh together on stage to read some of our poetry, and yeah, that was definitely one of my top poetry-related memories and favorite experiences. It's a poetry book I often recommend to people who want to start reading poetry, because I think it's so important. And finally, this is Kostya Zalakis. It's his very first pamphlet, and Kostya is a London-based poet who is originally from Greece, and he's going to be interviewed here next week. So I'm not going to say much about this, actually, except tune in for an interview with Kostya. It's going to be very exciting. We'll talk about queer poetry, and we'll talk about growing up in another country and writing in English. All of these things together, because those are some of my favorite themes and concerns. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you will comment. Tell me if you've read any of these books. Tell me what other books I'm missing, because I know there are so many more LGBTQ poets, and I will come back with trans poets next time. So I hope to see you again soon. Bye.